believes, and what you've now done is trivialize culture, have you not? You've said, well, this is all they pretty much, we built this country, let's be clear. But what we're being told is, people of color, we bring you little festivals and stuff and your food and you can dance and all that. And then we'll move about the real culture. You see, so that's called the fruit and festival approach to dealing with issues of race. Again, trivializing it. The other one is the person that, and you'll hear about these people do this. These are people that go, well, I really don't care what color you are. You could be purple, green, or blue. Well, guess what? We're not. They can't even use the real colors. And this is all associated with the discomfort or cognitive dissonance, if you will, associated with just dealing with this issue of race. So what I'm going to do is get up close and personal with this issue of race. I want us to talk about it. I want us to look at it. I want us to question it. But I want you to know that we didn't get here by ourselves. This is an old problem, a very old problem. It's so old, in fact, that it reaches very close to where we are right now. I'm going to go to Numbers 12. In the Bible, Numbers 12. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. And apparently they were a little upset about that. Well, it kindled the anger of the Lord. And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And it goes on to say that God smite Miriam with leprosy, sent her out from the people for 7 days, and said that if her father had but spit in her face, she had to be ashamed at least 7 days. And then the people didn't journey into a whole long thing because she didn't like Moses' black wife. Now I'm 46 years old. I have a lot of friends that are Jewish, and we have discussed lots of things, but for some reason we never discussed Moses' black wife. We could be related. Now, they did try to get at it with a cartoon recently. A couple years ago, they had a cartoon on Moses. And I was pretty impressed because his wife was brown. Moses himself was brown in the beginning. He became fully white by the end of the cartoon, however. But it was at least the first attempt to deal with the truth. So I want to say that the problem is old. It is an old one. And whenever you're trying to prove something to someone, especially if you're trying, my family, we talk all at once. We're pretty intense people. You got to kind of jump in there. And whenever you're trying to really prove your point, there's a couple things that you say when people aren't buying it. You say, well, I read it somewhere. And that means it's in a book, which means it must be the truth. Okay. Now, when you fail to produce the book, you up the ante. And you say, well, it's a scientific fact. What I'm talking about is scientific fact. Now, here's what we understand about science. Science changes its mind every 5 years. Takes back everything it said, never says it was wrong, says we've had a paradigm shift. Now, and I also have to remind people that just because it's in a book doesn't mean it's... Because the criminally insane can also write. So now let's go to those areas that we so often turn to for our proof. Let's go to science. And these are things that are very important because this actually comes out of a book. Okay. How many of you are familiar with Carl von Linnaeus? Carl von Linnaeus. I want you to remember this date, 1707 to 1778. This is when he lived. Carl von Linnaeus developed a taxonomic system based on a criterion of skin color and laid the basis for 19th century racial classification. Linnaeus properly began the science of anthropology. So Linnaeus is to anthropology what Freud is to psychology, the father of psychology. Now, a lot of people don't like Freud, particularly women. And those who don't have the issue with the things he said about women, know that he was on cocaine most of the time. But you cannot deal with psychology unless you go through Freud. So the same is true of Linnaeus. Folks don't like Linnaeus too much, but you can't avoid him. Although color classification of races dated back to the ancient Egyptians, anthropologists referred to Linnaeus' taxonomy of 1735 as the first modern study of man. While Linnaeus advanced classification with his use of a color criterion, he also fixed on his four families of man certain moral and intellectual peculiarities that continued into the 19th century anthropological vocabulary. He described Homo Americanus. Who might that be? That would be the Native American or the Indian. Homo Americanus, he said they were reddish, choleric, obstinate, contented, and regulated by customs. Homo Europaeus, as white, fickle, sanguine, blue-eyed, gentle, and governed by laws. Homo Asiaticus, as sallow, grave, dignified, avaricious, and ruled by opinions. And Homo Afer, as black, phlegmatic, cunning, lazy, lustful, careless, and governed by caprice. These insights into what Linnaeus defined as racial character, personality, behavior, intelligence, language, and a host of other related categories were transmitted into subsequent attempts at a science of classification and became more fixed than the races themselves. Not a shred of science here. But it's in a book. But more importantly, of all the groups mentioned, there was only one that had the most scathing assessment, and that was Homo Afer. And now I'm going to tell you why that's so, because we know there's no science here. The reason why is because of that notion of cognitive dissonance. Now let me explain how that works. If I have a certain amount of information, knowledge, values, and beliefs that I hold true, and I am now faced with something in either my behavior or in my world that conflicts with that, it creates dissonance. Human beings work to remove dissonance. You cannot function with it. For example, if there is a child that I'm dealing with, and I've dealt with all of what they call the bad children, I want you to imagine a bad child. For 15 years, Johnny's been told he's bad. What does he believe that he is? Bad. He believes he's bad. And then the social worker types like myself show up and say to Johnny, "No, Johnny," because we've taken parent effectiveness training, "you're not bad. You're good." What does Johnny then do? He does something very bad. He breaks my windshield, cracks it, slashes my tires, and says, "There, I told you, I'm bad." Now, see, I'm from South Central. I'm going to go with him on that. But if I'm a good social worker, I'm going to continue to say to Johnny that you are good until he maybe carves out a piece of himself that begins to believe good. But what happens when I tell Johnny he's good is it creates cognitive dissonance. And Johnny does something to remove the dissonance, to confirm for himself who he is.